very glad and honored to be here today. And to give you this short talk about termites, so you'll see that it will be very different from what you heard until now. And I won't talk about termites for what they are, but more to what they do. So for most of the people, termites are real pests in plantations and plagues for wooden constructions. When I say most of the people, I also include, this is a light, scientists. And these two charts show that we have every year almost 2 to 3 times more papers dealing with the dark side of termites, so their negative impact on as pests, than papers focusing on their bright side. So the papers dealing with termites as pests are in white, and the other one are in gray. So 2 times more papers than papers focusing on their ecological impact, so their positive or their bright side effect on ecosystem functioning. So and the same trend for the number of citations every year. So the idea here is to demonstrate that we have a rather negative perception of termites, of the negative impact, of the ecological impact of termites. And then that we have that much more energy and perhaps money has been spent to control and eradicate this dark side than to understand and perhaps use this positive effect that termites can have in ecosystem. And that's really a pity because termites have a huge impact on ecosystem functioning. So first of all, I'd like to come back to what I mean by soil engineers. So, so termites are pests or soil engineers. By soil engineers, I come back to the definition given by some colleagues several years ago. And the idea here is that termites are doing more than just belonging to the food web. They modify, maintain, or produce habitats for others including microbes, animals, plants, and then impact the cycling, the distribution of nutrients in the ecosystem, and the dynamic of water and soil as well. And this at different scales, at very small scales, so at the clay, so the smallest particle size, soil particle size, at the aggregate scale, at the soil profile scale, but also at the landscape. Then they will impact key ecological functions associated to soil fertility, plant growth and diversity, carbon sequestration, and so on. So I'll give you now 2 examples. The first is coming from a study carried out in Vietnam, where we compared the impact of different invertebrates on soil porosity and water infiltration. And if earthworms play a very important role in our temperate or European soils, in this study, we see that their impact was rather low in comparison with beetles and termites. Here's the water infiltration. and the impact of termites, and this is the control. So the impact of termites is especially important because of their abundance in this environment. So they create many holes open to the surface. So they create galleries that are on the subsurface, mainly horizontal, but sometimes and open on the surface with these holes, and sometimes very vertical, going deeper inside the soil. And this is a reason why they impact positively water infiltration. And interestingly, this approach, this impact of termites on water infiltration, is at the heart of one agricultural practice called the ZAI system that can be found in Africa, in sub-Saharan ecosystem, and here in Burkina Faso. So the idea that the farmers create pits, many holes, in which they had organic matter, so litter, and this litter is very attractive to termites. So the termites will come, produce galleries, open to the surface, collect the litter, consume the litter, and all these holes will increase the water infiltration by almost 2 times. And this will also, and because water is also the limiting factor in this environment, this will lead to an increase in sorghum yield by almost 10-fold. And we can see below that this practice can also be used to restore degraded land and to reestablish forests here after 30 years. At another scale, termites can also produce mounds Here is an example. So from a study carried out in India, we found that termites produce these mounds from the soil collected in the deeper soil layers, here at about 50 centimeter depth. They collect this soil, they enrich the soil, in fact, in carbon, so between 2 to 4 times more carbon in these mounds than in the surrounding soil, more nitrogen, more clay, and between 3 to 14 times more cations inside these mounds than in the surrounding soil. So, and these mounds can be observed in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and especially in a region in the lower Mekong Basin from Laos, in northeast Thailand, and in Cambodia. These mounds are very abundant. And we found that in Thailand, during the rainy season, when all the paddy fields are flooded, these mounds host a larger biodiversity, higher diversity, and especially a diversity and the presence of specific predators, which might be useful, perhaps in terms of biological pest control in this environment. Still in the paddy field, these mounds, this time in Cambodia, are cut. So the farmers limit the growth of the mounds and use the soil built by termites, produced by termites, and they use it as an amendment, as a kind of cheap fertilizer to increase the fertility of their land, of their paddy field. In Cambodia, in Laos, this time, the farmers use the specific fertility of these mounds, as well as the shadow, because of the presence of the trees, to grow different kind of vegetable. So here it's pumpkins. Because we have more invertebrates in this mound, and some of these invertebrates are also consumed by the local people. Because termites are mostly fungus-growing termites, they produce mushroom, and the farmers also consume these mushrooms. And finally, most of the trees that are growing on these mounds are also medicinal plants, and the farmers use them to cure some diseases. So we see here that these mounds provide many different ecosystem services to the population, to the farmers. So now, to conclude this very short presentation, I just wanted to share with you something I learned from India, something very different. As we saw before, so termites provide different ecosystem services because of their impact on ecosystem functioning. So we usually talk about the provisioning services, supporting services, and sometimes regulating services. But here, termites also provide cultural services. So it's not rare to see termite mounds like this in India. And that look like to be worshipped by the population. And there are two reasons for that, as far as I know. There's maybe more, but I know at least two. The first is that termites are real ecosystem engineers. That is, that they produce habitats for others, and others including snakes. And the snakes love living in abundant termite mounds. And the snake is also the vehicle or the attribute of one of the most important gods in Hinduism, Shiva. And then, through this activity of termites, people use this activity for devotional purposes. The second reason finds its root in the story of Valmiki. Valmiki is this poet and Brahmin, very important in Hinduism, because he wrote one of the most important books in Hinduism, the Ramayana, the story of Rama. And before being Valmiki, he was a robber. His name was Ratnakara. If there are Indian here, I'm sorry for my pronunciation. But so his name was Ratnakara. And he was a robber and also a murderer. But one day, he entered in deep meditation. And his meditation was so deep that termites, that he was buried alive by termites that grew a nest on him. And then, after this, he became Valmiki. And the meaning of Valmiki is the one born inside an ant or termite hill. And then wrote the Ramayana. So I think it's a beautiful story, maybe not when I explain it, but it's a very nice story. And there is maybe a lesson we can get from it, is that termites, through their activity as soil engineers, are able to produce the best, so the services they provide to humanity, to humankind, from the worst, that is their need to consume litter, organic matter, and to act as pests in some plantations. And then we can even say that termites, in a way, they remind us that both are linked, the worst and the best, the good and the bad, and that to get the bright, we also need sometimes the dark. Thank you.
Thank you. Time for some questions. Come on.
I told you it was very different. Huh?
So I have a question, a very quick one. Does the climate change affect the distribution of the termites? Have you seen some changes recently?
In fact, we have an observatory in India where we follow the distribution of termite mounds, and we didn't see. It's very difficult to see because, in fact, if we, for example, the nest, we start to see them when the colony has already 3 or 4 years. So it's very difficult to see, to relate the climate, the evolution of the rainfall, for example, to the dynamic of the populations. But the most important, what is really important is what we do with our land. So it's clearly the land use. And
can we have in the next years the termites near Paris, for example, with the
we have a quarantine room in Bondy, so there is no risk for that. So
thank you.
No issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other quick question. So I always learned, yes, that the worms were the main engineers of the soil, and so I was wondering why isn't there worms in these countries, and what is there anything known on a competition between worms and insects in different regions?
So in fact, what we usually observe that during the rainy season, we have more earthworms and ants and other animals and beetles, for example, that are very important. If we focus on the porosity and the water dynamic, but nutrient cycling is the same. So usually during the rainy season, it's mainly earthworms, and during the dry season, it will be mainly termites. In this environment, in Asia and in Africa. But if we speak about South America, for example, where it's very humid, we can find a lot of termites as well, and it's very humid. So they are not the same kind of termites. And their impact, if we have to compare their impact with earthworms, I have no idea. I already had this kind of discussion with, for example, Patrick Lavelle, and it's still an open question in this specific environment.
Another last question.
Yes, you didn't mention something which I think it's really important, the fact that they have this very large-scale organization, that what we see from the soil is nothing compared to the underground organization. There is, recently I saw in some, I don't remember which journal, but this kind of satellite image from Brazil, which show a territory of several, 100 kilometers size or something like that, which show that it's just one termite colony what we see from above is nothing compared to what is below. Though in terms of engineering, is enormous. Could you comment about that, please?
No, I had only 10 minutes, so really I had to do quick. Yes. And I wanted to share something with you, a bit maybe different, but from India, and I think it's quite something we don't see every day. So you're right. That's what I talk about, different scales, in fact. They impact things at very small, narrow scales, and sometimes at the landscape. And when we speak about landscape, it's really a huge environment, like the paper you're talking about. So, yes, of course. So
remind me the size, because my order of magnitude is 100 kilometers, but what is the size of this organization? It's somewhere in Brazil.
No, we have to. I know what you're talking about, but I don't know precisely the size.
250 kilometers, say my neighbor. Yeah.
Okay.
250,000. That's what you say. You see, much more. No, it's really major.
But don't worry, they won't come here. So.
Okay, thank you very much.